Hello, and welcome back to another video in the three-part series of The Art of Chillbeats. This video is focused primarily on the sounds that make up the chillbeats, so the characteristics that make lo-fi into lo-fi. This is by no means an exhaustive list. This is probably actually pretty basic as far as how to actually make this music go. There's a lot more nuance to this, but I just wanted to talk about a few of the little things. As we come into this, just a brief introduction for anyone who has not yet seen the first video. My artist name is Feral Cat. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Feral Cat with the 3 instead of the first E. I'm also on Spotify, Bandcamp, Patreon, really whatever platform exists, I've probably signed up for it. But my real name is Roger Romero. I am a musician, composer, teaching artist, and producer who lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And although I can put on all of these hats, I am primarily a saxophone player, and I spend a lot of my time playing the saxophone and learning more about various wind instruments. So, what you'll need in order to get started for this class, first thing you're going to need is, or at least I would prefer that you have, is a pair of headphones so that you can listen better to the details that we're talking about in this. So it doesn't have to be a super crazy studio set or super fancy headphones, just something where you can isolate sound. So AirPods work just fine, but laptop speakers or iPhone speakers are not quite the best idea, at least not right now. You'll need to be able to access and listen to YouTube video playlists, at the very least be able to switch back and forth between this video and another video. I'm sure that's pretty basic knowledge for most people, but I do ask that you reference a few YouTube videos and YouTube playlists that we should be listening to. And although we are going to talk a little bit about jazz and the music theory behind it, you don't actually need to know any music theory or any jazz theory before we actually get started with this tutorial and with this video. It does help if you have some sort of prior knowledge, because I'm just giving a very cursory overview, a very easy, simplified version of something that is ultimately very complicated. So it helps to have some amount of knowledge, and if you want, please spend some amount of time learning some stuff too, because I, for one, enjoy jazz theory. So this is the second video in our course where we're learning things that make up lo-fi hip-hop, or otherwise known as chillbeats. So this video focuses on the sounds and textures that make a chillbeat sound like a chillbeat. Alright, so first things first is vinyl crackle or vinyl hiss. So just as sort of an overview of what I'm actually talking about here, vinyl crackle refers to the secondary sound produced by the needle of a record player or a turntable. So when an album is dusty, the grooves of a vinyl record, which are what actually allow the needle to produce sound, can produce a static-like sound as a byproduct of playing the music. So you'll actually hear that kind of staticky sound alongside the music that you're playing with the vinyl itself. Similarly, because I said vinyl crackle or tape hiss refers to the sound of an analog or old school tape recorder or a tape machine actually running, because these are mechanical sounds. There's a piece of it where the tape is actually like turning, so that sound of that tape turning is a sound within itself. And while it is not meant to be the main sound of what you're hearing, a lot of the time in lo-fi or in older style music, when you're hearing things that are old school, you might hear that by nature because of what the music comes from, but also in lo-fi, we kind of add that stuff in. So ambient sounds or background sounds in general are heavily used in the production of lo-fi hip-hop or chillbeats. The term lo-fi actually stands for low fidelity. It's a shorthand for it, which is in contrast with the high standard of music that a lot of people were making and that we're very commonly used to, which is can be referred to as high fidelity. So in lo-fi, low fidelity music, imperfections in sound like tape hiss and vinyl crackle are not only encouraged, but are significant to the soundscape of the genre. So there is a historical significance of this sound. It's where kind of lo-fi gets its name. Now, vinyl crackle is not an exclusive part, or like you don't need vinyl crackle in order for it to be lo-fi. You don't need tape hiss for it to be lo-fi. It's just pretty common to hear these kind of like ambient sounds. All right, so chopping samples. So like with most old school hip hop, lo-fi hip hop and chill beats take a lot of aesthetic ideas from chopping up samples. So this is actually the same image that I was using before to describe what J Dilla was using. This is the MPC 3000, and J Dilla, a producer who influenced a lot of the lo-fi hip hop that we hear today, would take different sounds from different records and different albums and put them to be triggered by these sort of touch-sensitive finger pads. So these days, a lot of producers don't necessarily have this piece of equipment, even though they're still making lo-fi, and they don't have like the analog, the physical equipment to make this, but they still use the aesthetic of what it sounds like to chop up a sample, because what happens is this MPC, this MIDI player will, once you push one button, it kind of takes over the sound of the other button. So playing them in sequence, you might actually be cutting off the sound from before. And that's a big part of what lo-fi hip hop, or that can be a big part of the sounds of lo-fi hip hop. So nowadays, the idea of chopping up a sample still persists, but we now do it digitally. So there are people who prefer to use the analog and to use the old school style of sampling, and nothing against that, but I'm also kind of presenting that there are a lot of producers who do this digitally. So using different digital audio workstations, producers emulate the effect of a piece of music getting cut off via another section of music starting again. So we'll kind of like cut off the music sample prematurely or before it's supposed to be cut off, so that the phrase doesn't entirely end, and you'll add different samples, different pieces of music similarly. There are also plugins and different like pieces of software that kind of do that by nature, and that's like what they're meant to do, is to give you that chopped sample sound. So this was more common in early stages of lo-fi, but yeah, starts and stops in melody, especially in instrumental parts, are definitely still very common. All right, so the big bad one, so jazz harmony. The reason I describe this, or I have to mention it at all, is because a lot of the time when we talk about lo-fi hip-hop, or chill beats, there's an element where people describe it as jazzy. And so there isn't a chance that I can explain even a fraction of what jazz harmony is within the course of a single video. But without getting too deep, the reason that chill beats can sound so jazzy is because of the types of chords or the harmony that are most common within the music. So chords being groups of notes, as opposed to just a single note, especially on a piano or on a guitar, or instruments that can play many notes at once. So the chords used in jazz are often richer and denser and more colorful than in folk or pop music, for example. So some common differences in the chords are heard in how many different notes actually fill up the chord. And I said different specifically because you can, on a piano or a guitar, layer the same notes but higher or lower than the note beforehand. And I want to describe different notes. So pop music commonly uses, or not just pop music, but folk music and other music that uses simpler harmony or simpler chords, will often use 3-note chords, which are called triads. In jazz harmony, we fill the chord up with 4 or more notes. So these extra notes often add color, and because of that give the chordal instrument, or naturally give the chordal instrument, the piano or the guitar, a jazzier feel. One of my favorite explanations and use cases for jazz harmony comes from a masterclass that I sat in on when I was a little bit younger, in my mid-20s, by a jazz vibraphonist and composer named Stefan Harris. So in his course, he can pretty miraculously take a class of mostly untrained listeners and have them all associate the sounds of jazz chords with either memories or like very common human feelings or common human emotions. And I thought that was awesome. So I'll link something for that as well, because I have an audio recording of it somewhere, and I might be able to upload it. If not, I know there's references to it everywhere, because I found that super helpful when I was there, and I did understand harmony at a certain level, but the way he described it and was able to really make you feel something just based off of different chords that he would play was really kind of marvelous to me. So like I said, this is a very cursory, very low-level view of jazz harmony. I didn't even go into actual chords or anything like that. And to be honest, in a lot of lo-fi, at least for the third video of my course, we'll be using a sample of someone else performing an instrumental part as opposed to inputting instrumental parts ourselves. Not only that, you don't necessarily need to know jazz harmony in order to be able to add these instrumental parts. There are different software pieces and different plugins that will take the key or the kind of tonal center of where you're playing in the music and add more notes to fill up the chords, to fill up the harmony and make it jazzier. So there's already stuff out there to make that kind of like an automatic process, and I think that's also very cool. Alright, so I created a playlist. Oop, hold on a sec. There we go. Just so you can see the image come back. I created a playlist on YouTube again. This time, instead of with song references, these mostly are tutorial and sound references. So the first video is just vinyl crackle going for 10 hours. Like, this is often, it's not the sample, but it is clearly an example of a sample that people would use underneath their music in lo-fi chill beats. There's a video on pop chords versus jazz chords that will go a little bit deeper into the jazz harmony, and then the art of sampling, intro to chopping, which will take some software elements or some software and actually cut up samples in order to make them sort of feel more like this lo-fi hip-hop idea. So there are also very much common playlists that feature chill beats that we should be using as reference to listen to. One of them is kind of like the iconic chilled cow, chill beats to study and relax to. Another one that I listen to on my own is called Code Pioneers Coding in Chicago, and that one's more for sound and well, it's all of these are effectively the same thing. It's a playlist of music that is meant to be played in the background. All right, so just in closing and with some reflection, students, upon listening to the music, should try and examine their own listening and see if examples of these sounds techniques exist in the music that they listen to. So what I mean by that is, again, listen and reference back to things that you already know and you already listen to. Do you hear tape hiss? Do you hear vinyl crackle? Use the reference videos that I have. Do you hear jazz harmony? Like, do you hear just colors? Do you hear things that make it sound jazzier? And sort of make note. A lot of music is honestly just stealing, but stealing in a very intentional way that puts your own voice into the music. So don't be afraid to pick up references and apply them directly to what you're making in the music. That's not to plagiarize. It is literally how people make work all the time. Sometimes directly as I'm saying it, and sometimes indirectly. But anyway, thank you for listening, and thank you for watching this video, and catch us again for video 3, where I actually am going to go through and make a very simple lo-fi chill beat in real time. So that one's going to be a longer video. I'll be using my DAW of choice, Logic, but you can feel free to use whichever digital audio workstation you prefer. But at that point in time, get used to or get ready to make some lo-fi. I'll see you then.